Life Her Podcast.
Hey, you.
Her is me, her is you. Her is us, her is she, her is we. United we stand, baby, that hurt for keeps. I'm coming and I demand my space, I know it's free. I owe myself the world, they tried to count me out. I've been down some dark roads, they tried to pound me out. From cloudy to sunny, ain't think that I would make it out. I needed positive emotions to fill me out.
Hey, ladies, I am your host, Yvette Lloyd. I would like to welcome Melody to Life Her Podcast. Hey, Melody.
Hey girl, how you doing?
I'm good. So tell
Good.
us a little bit about yourself. Who is Melody?
Who's Melody? That's such a question because I never really know how to answer that. Who am I? Well, I am originally from Harlem. I grew up in Harlem in the 80s and 90s, so you can kind of imagine how that was. I was raised by my grandparents, specifically my grandmother, my paternal grandmother, and so I lived in Harlem pretty much my entire life, and then went to college, and then I moved to Charlotte, North Carolina in 2011, I believe it was, like 2011, and mainly because I just didn't want to raise my son in New York.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a challenge, and it's New York is kind of crazy. I love it. It's made me who I am, but I knew I wanted a change of scenery, and I knew that I wanted to give my son a different environment to grow in. So I moved here in 2011. I stayed here with family for a little bit, but then I kind of went out on my own and just like did my own thing. My background originally is in PR, public relations, and communications, marketing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did that for nonprofits and entertainment PR, and that was fun but exhausting. So I have been in nonprofit communications probably about 15 years. But
Wow.
on December 31st, 2019, I was my last day working for anyone.
Wow.
Yeah, so I had become.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I had kind of become like really disheartened by the nonprofit sector and how it affects change, but then also how it treats its staff and treats its employees and the good work that it's supposed to do, but what you have to do in order to get it. And so, like, I was known for that. I was known for nonprofit, working in nonprofit and doing marketing and doing communications. But then I also had this, like, side business that I had been trying to build for the longest. And that kind of happened due to my experience. So I moved here, like I said, in 2011. And I met someone in 2013. And in 2013, I thought, oh my gosh, this guy is amazing. Like, he's great. He's affectionate. He picks me up from work and takes me home and all this good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And, I was like, oh, okay, this is kind of cool. And
Right.
then slowly but surely, I've discovered that, like, he was abusive. And so the
Aw.
interesting thing about that is when we first met, he was outright. He said, I dated this girl and she called the police on me and told me that told them that I was abusive or whatever. So I have an arrest charge for that. He was like, I've never been convicted. Now,
You make it
right,
make you say, But
right.
you
So,
know what's so crazy? You know, sometimes us as women, a guy will pamper us so good because it's something we've always been looking for. But
mhm,
it's like they give us signs and signals, but it
yeah,
still passes us by, and we just be like, "Oh, okay." Instead of doing our investigation early instead of later.
yeah. Yeah. Well, yes. And so there's that, but there's also, I remember thinking, so to be transparent, my mom has always been in an abusive relationship for the most part of my childhood. I never lived with my mom, but I saw domestic violence in home with my my grandparents, my aunts, my uncles, my mom, and my dad at one point was an abusive man. And so my mindset was, I kind of like subconsciously, I was like, well, my dad, definitely changed, and so okay or whatever. But I don't even think I was thinking that at the time. I just was like, oh, he dated some crazy girl who lied about him being abusive. That's what I was thinking. I was like, oh, okay, And so we went about our business. He actually wound up moving in with me because he had some issues with where he was living. And so, and I say all of that because this all plays a role, right? You'll see. So I, so we moved in together. He was working through temp agencies. He preferred to work through temp agencies. And so I still worked at my job, but I was working part-time. I worked at a local nonprofit, and I worked part-time. And so I enjoyed, prior to dating him, I went out a lot. I would go out a lot. I went to parties. I hung out with my friends. I was a social butterfly. But eventually, like, he started taking up so much of my time. He picking me up from work. He dropping me off. We're going food shopping. We're doing the family thing. I have a son. I have he's now 11, affectionately known as KGB. And so, we're doing the family thing. And I'm like, okay, this is great, But eventually, things started shifting because when we would have arguments, they would turn into these like big blowouts. They were just like extreme, where it was like yelling, and he's calling me a bitch, and and I'm from New York, so it's like I'm from New York. I mean, I'm little, like I'm a little person, like I'm short. I'm only 5'1", but I don't take any shit. You know what I mean? And so
most of y'all don't. Most
well,
of y'all don't.
True. I mean, this is true. And so I'm like, okay, you're not going to talk to me that way. So you need to chill out, whatever. And we're going back and forth, and and then slowly but surely it starts escalating. So it went from just like arguments to yelling to name calling to grabbing me and holding me, not letting me move, and it just started escalating. And in May 2015, we had an argument, a huge blowout. And I was saying, let me just leave. Let me walk out the house so that I can diffuse the situation and we can have some semblance of a conversation later. Like, let me remove myself, right? Because that's generally, if things are getting heated, the mature thing to do is to remove yourself from the situation. So I was headed to walk out the door, and he grabs me and flings me to the ground so hard that I sprained my ankle. Now, mind you, I played football, like little touch football as a kid. I climbed trees, I ran track, and I have never broken a bone. I have never sprained an ankle. I have never fractured anything, ever. And so this is 2015, so I was 35. So at 35, I sprained my ankle. Correction. Let me use correct words. He sprained my ankle.
Wow.
And so I couldn't even stand up. And so I was screaming, and he runs out the door because now he knows he done fucked up. He's fucked up. And so my neighbor comes, and she has a knife in her hand, and she's helping me, and she's telling my son, come on, and we go into her apartment, and we call now. Her partner had already been on the phone with 911. And so, because they can hear us. They can hear the arguing and fighting. They can hear all of that. And so you would think, right, that would make me go, enough is enough. Right? And I did for a little bit. I went and I got a restraining order. And I had to, they told me I had a sprain and I was on crutches. And I had bruises and scratches from us going back and forth, and you would think that would make me go, enough. But he violated the restraining order to tell me, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, I apologize, and, please forgive me. Will you marry me? Oh, that's a good one. Will you marry me?
Yeah,
And
right.
so after a while, I didn't go back to court to extend the restraining order, and he moved back in, and all this other stuff. And so, he would say that this was my fault. I'm sorry, but then as time went on, he was like, "You're out of control. You don't listen. You were out of control. That was your fault. You did that. You brought that on yourself." And I was like, no, the fuck I didn't. So I did not bring this on myself at all. And so eventually, they love bomb you. So they show you all this affection, and you think that everything is good, but then they are who they are until they get help. And so if you're in denial about the fact that you're an abusive person, eventually that's going to come back. And it started to come back. I recall one time that he held me down and he had a pillow over my face. And he had his knee in my chest. And I'm like, okay, this is not cool. This is not how this is supposed to be at all. Now, mind you, very few people knew what was going on with it. Very few people knew what was going on. And I think those who didn't want to acknowledge that, I was experiencing abuse. I think that was really hard. And I think that was hard because even myself, I couldn't even articulate. I couldn't even say the words at all that I was a victim of domestic violence. I was being abused. I could not articulate those words. I could not say them. And that was really hard for me. So I can't imagine my friends, my close friends, who, mind you, most of them are in New York. So I didn't really have a ton of friends out here. Most of them are in New York.
Okay.
And my family that is here, they have their own stuff going on. You know what I mean? They have their own stuff going on. And so I started to kind of push back. I started to be less submissive. I started to really just not take his word at anything. And so we were bickering, and he stopped paying his portion of the bills.
So what made you continue to stay after that?
Because I loved him at the time, and I thought that, we could overcome this.
Right.
I really thought that we could overcome it because I didn't understand how abuse works.
Okay.
I wasn't really clear on it. Even though
you seeing it, from you growing up seeing it, it was like
it was kind of normalized.
Yeah, that's what they're saying, like an ongoing cycle.
And so it's funny because I remember, and I share this all the time. It's interesting because when I was younger and my mother would be abused, I would always say that would never be me. I would always say that. I would say that would never happen to me. And I remember saying that. I was so angry with my mother. Because my mother she was just this warrior woman. She was this woman who, she took no stuff. She grew up in the 70s and 80s of Harlem. She did what she had to do. She bust ass and did what she had to do. And so I couldn't, because I saw as someone who was being abused as weak, right? That's the idea that they tell us. Someone who's experiencing that is weak. And that's what he would always call me. He would always call me weak. Always call me weak. He's like, you're weak.
What's amazing about a person that use words against you, like as far as a man, is really a reflection of themselves on how they feel. And they make us as women, by us being so nurturing, so caring and loving, we think we could change that man and create him to love us and be able to, treat us the way we want to be treated, but not knowing we hindering ourselves.
Yeah. And I think the other part, especially this happens in relationships that are abusive, is that we're always in turmoil, we're always in anxiety, we're always in that. But there's these like fake moments of like lull where but reality is we're still walking around on pins and needles. So even when times felt quote unquote good, I still walked around on pins and needles because I didn't know what I was going to say or do or where, let's talk about that, right? Or where that would trigger him into attacking me, whether verbally, emotionally, physically, all of that stuff. So it took a lot. And so I didn't leave right away when I sprained my ankle, and I stayed. And eventually he started not paying bills. And I was like, look, now, if my mother has not taught me anything, it is that nobody can live anywhere for free. That is just, especially a grown person. You cannot live anywhere for free. And so I said, you have to pay your bills. And if you cannot pay your bills, you have to leave my house. He's like, you don't own this. I said, you live here. You don't own shit. like who do you think, like, this apartment's in my name, like, so for you to try to insult me like it's just an apartment building, you don't own it. I'm like, but you don't even own this. Like, you don't even have anything in your name.
Right.
So, they try to insult you, and they try to find ways, and that honestly was the tip of the iceberg for me, with him not paying his bills. And I recall one day we were arguing, March 12, 2016. We were arguing, and I said, you have to pay your rent by the time I get back, because if you don't, then you have to leave, and I will file an eviction. And he was like, well, you need to talk to me. I said, we'll talk once you pay. But if you're not going to pay, you can't stay here. And so he was really just like annoyed by that. And we got into a big old argument, and I left. I remember I was leaving because I was taking my son to acting class. And so after I left there, my stepmother called me, who wound up moving here. My stepmother calls me, and she says, so you should probably know that, no, I'm sorry. He's calling me. He's like, you're going to jail, watch. And I said, okay, bye, click, hung up. And I wound up hanging out with my son, doing things, and I can't recall if we went to family's house or whatever, but we were just out and about. And my stepmother calls me, she says, don't go back home. And I'm like, why? She said, he called the cops on you. Like,
what?
He pressed charges against you. He said that you threw a sneaker at him. And I said, I'm sorry, say that again? So he went and filed a charge on me. Now, he called the cops first.
Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Have you ever called the cops on him?
Oh, yeah. The cops were really familiar with us. Yeah, I've called. They were really familiar with us. Some of them gave a damn. Some of them did not. Most of them did not. It was literally one guy that actually gave a damn. Most of them did not.
Do you think of them not caring because they knew it was something ongoing, or
right.
they just didn't completely care?
Yeah. So when it comes to domestic violence, there are two types of officers, I find. There's those who take it extremely seriously, because most times when officers are shot in the line of duty, it is in response to a domestic violence call. Majority of the time. That's a statistic, well known, you can look it up. Majority of the time. So some of them take it really seriously. And then there are others who victim blame.
Right.
And they don't have any sympathy. They don't care, because they say, well, you're just going to go back anyway. And we're going to talk, like, we can talk about that too, that whole idea of women or victims in general just going back. We can talk about that too, And so at that point, I was like, well, this relationship is definitely over. You've officially called the cops. You're trying to get me arrested, and that is it. Like, I was like, that is it. I said, we're done. we're absolutely done. And he's calling me or whatever, and I was like, just leave my house. I don't want anyone to talk. Just leave. Like, you don't, just leave. Grab your stuff and go. Like, leave. And so I stayed with my family for a while,
Wow.
and I had to go to court. I had to go to court. And so we had to, because the officers weren't taking the report, he went to the magistrate, he filed the charge, and we had to go to mediation.
Mm-hmm.
So this is someone who has a record for assault on a female. This is someone who I'm not married to. We have no property together. We have no children together. But we had to go to mediation. And I had to sit there while he tells the mediators all the things that he did for me. I did this and I did that and da-da-da-da-da. And so the mediator said, well, we can solve this really easily with a no contact rule, no contact order for both of you guys, like neither one. And so I said, oh, that's fine. Let's do it. Let's get it. Right. And he said, no, she needs to say that she hit me with a sneaker. I said, I didn't do anything.
And so he still wants to be in control of everything. And that's where the manipulation comes in.
Yeah.
And the fact of them playing with your mind in so many ways to make you feel guilty off what you've done and eliminate whatever they have done over the time.
Absolutely. The biggest thing is the emotional and mental abuse. For me, that is the biggest thing, because for the longest, and even sometimes periodically now, words that he would say would still seep into my consciousness. It just happened. If something happened or someone said something to me that reminded me of the things that he would say, it would make me, jump like, what? Wait, what? And so, anywho, to kind of like fast forward a little bit, we went back and forth to court. I actually had to get a lawyer because we couldn't come to an agreement during mediation, so we had to go to criminal court. I had to get a lawyer. I had to miss work a lot. I had to find childcare for my son. And in between all of that, he was stalking me.
Wow.
And so he was showing up at my job. He spoke to my colleagues to tell them that I was arrested and that I was abusive. He would show up at my son's school. He showed up at my stepmom's house. He showed up at my sister's house. He showed up at my friend's job. He called people. He inboxed friends. Like, it was ongoing. He would email me all day and all night. He would text me all day and all night. Never mind that I would tell him, you need to not call me. I sent him the actual law around stalking to say, like, this is illegal. You need to stop communicating me. Even after he climbed into my apartment window, he took things from my apartment that did not belong to him. I tried to get a restraining order. The judge told me that I'm just mad because he's breaking up with me, even though I'm the one that's bringing the charge.
The judge said that?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. And then, sometimes they wonder why women are afraid to even call the police or calling one, because no one isn't securing them. They're not making them feel safe.
Yeah.
Because of how they have these laws of women being abused, and sometimes them judges and officers and stuff, they do it at home too.
So all police officers have the highest rate of domestic violence. Yes, they do. They have an exceptionally high rate of domestic violence. And so, the judge did give me my apartment back, though, even though he took things, and gave him a deadline to pick up his stuff. And when the deadline came, he came for a little bit, and he saw that my homeboy was there, and he felt some kind of way, and so he just left his stuff. But even after court, he showed up. He stalked me after court, like, and I go out the building, he's there, and I'm like, why are you here? Like, stop talking to me. And he's like, you're out of control. You need to just listen to me. I'm the man. And I was like, if you got to tell me you're the man, are you really the man? Like, are you really though? And so It was a lot. So you think that you leave, and everyone thinks, okay, once you leave, it's over with. No. When you leave, that increases your risk of being killed. When a woman leaves, when a victim of domestic violence leaves, that increases their chance of being killed 3 times over. And I think that's what people do not understand. This is a man who absolutely said that he would kill me and him.
Oh, man.
And so when we tell people to leave, just leave, when we tell women just leave, that it is not that easy. Because when we're with them, we can kind of manage their temperament a little bit. We kind of know, like we learn a little bit of what their triggers are, right? We know don't wear that because he's going to feel some kind of way about that. You know, don't say this. Don't agree with this. We kind of can temperament certain things. But when we leave, all bets are off because we've escalated the situation. How dare we leave them? How dare we leave them? And people do not understand. When you see that a woman has been murdered by her partner, by her abuser, it is most of the time after she left. She made the decision to leave.
Right.
She was unsafe because there are very little restraining orders are sadly just paper.
Yeah, most of them, they don't care about no restraining order.
Oh, no, not at all. I told you, he violated the restraining order with no problem. Violated the restraining order. You know, I could have sent him to jail right then and there.
So how did it end up becoming to a point he just left you alone, like, forever?
So what happened was we went to criminal court and I spoke to my lawyer and I explained to her and her supervisor, I said, listen, basically this is just my abuser using the system to control me because he can't physically, financially, emotionally control me anymore. So now he's using the system to do it. So this is me, you know, making it inconvenient that I have to take off work. I have to find childcare. I had to get, you know, I had to print out all the text messages, all the emails. I had to get notices from my colleagues about what he said to them. My sisters came to court with me. One of my good friends came to court with me. And so she spoke to me and she says, well, now he's saying that you slapped him. And I said, yeah, so he's changing the story. And, like, you're trying to escalate the charge, right? You're trying to escalate the charge so that eventually I could potentially go to jail.
Yeah, but
And
you have
so,
all the evidence in the world of all the things he's been doing.
yeah. And so she said, okay, well, hold on one second. She said, we probably have to, you know, get another court date because I need to look at all the evidence. Yada. I said, well, I'll be here, and I'll be here at the other court date. And so she went, and I sat down, and she said, okay, well, sit right here for a second. I sat down in the courtroom, and she went up to the DA, and she comes back, and she says, well, come walk out with me. I said, okay. And she hands me a paper. She said, your case is dismissed. So I could only assume that the DA said, well, wait a minute, you originally said that she hit you with a sinker. Now you're saying she slapped you. And you have a record for assault on a female, and you have a record of assault with this particular female, right? And so I think because of that, he didn't have any other ways to control. Because he knew if he came to me again, I was going to call the cops and he was going to go to jail. I was going to press charges. He was going to go to jail. Like, I meant that wholeheartedly. He was going to go to jail. And I told him that. I said, either you're going to go to jail or you're going to die. It's one or the other at this point because you cannot keep putting me against the wall and thinking that I'm not going to fight back. Like, that, it was enough at that point. You know what I mean? Like, it was enough. And as soon as I said enough and that I realized that I was capable of caring for myself, because part of it felt like I needed his money to pay the bills, right? But when I realized that no, I can do this on my own. I don't need savings. I don't need anybody to save me. I don't need anybody to take care of me. I can do this on my own. And once I realized that, and that I had my own power and I can control my own destiny, I didn't care about anything else. My freedom of in all ways, my freedom mentally, emotionally, spiritually, financially, all of that is my number one priority still. And so I felt that once I overcame that, once I was able to leave that situation, that I was unstoppable. Like, seriously, I was unstoppable. As cliche as that sounded, I was unstoppable. And it showed every day, every time after that. It showed. Whenever I showed up authentically, whenever I showed up in a way that was freeing for myself and for others, I didn't have any issues anymore. I didn't have issues with work and securing the bag in terms of like, okay, this is how much money I want to make. Are you going to give this to me? Yes, we will. Awesome. Let's do it. This is what I want to do. You know, like it just became this like flow of abundance.
Right.
You know, and so that's kind of what drove me to where I am now and the work that I do now. Because I feel like if I can empower, if I can support other women in getting free, free from all of it, free from other people's expectations of us, free from our expectations of ourselves that are rooted in hurt and pain and trauma. Like if I can do that, then I feel better. So the more I help other people, the more I help other women, the more I help mothers, that helps me. That heals me every single time. So that's what drove me to becoming a full-time domestic violence and motherhood speaker. That's what drove me to become a blogger and blog about the craziness of my silliness and seriousness of my life. That's what drove me to becoming a domestic violence coach and coaching women to how you've left and now what. That is the biggest thing. You've left and now what? Because you don't know. This is a whole new world of freedom, right, that we are discovering about ourselves and about our world. So how do we navigate that?
So how did
yeah.
you, like, after you dealt with all that, did you ever go to counseling for yourself? Because, you know, sometimes when we go through things like that, we
Yeah.
find ourselves traumatized. And then
Yeah.
if we meet another guy, you know, we be on pins and
Mhm.
needles. We look for signs. We listen
Mhm.
to certain things that they say. So
Mhm.
are you still battling that, or you find yourself overcoming it a little after
Yeah.
seeking help?
Right. So in 2015, after the situation with my ankle, I went to counseling.
Okay.
And I went, which the crazy thing is, like, I was going to counseling, right? But he was driving me there. So I'm going to counseling to talk about this man, but he's driving me there, you know. But my counselor was great. And she didn't really focus so much on him per se, but more so on me and
Yeah.
what my journey looks like and
And
how can I,
that's some good counseling, because
yeah,
you know you don't want to focus on him because you do
right.
that already.
That's
So
right.
when you find time out for yourself to recognize different toxic traits that you have, it helps you build
Mhm.
yourself up and
Mhm.
realize like who you are as far as your self-worth.
Absolutely. And so I went back after I left him, I went back and I would go once a week to counseling and talk to her, and it was great. And it was a stepping stone. So I'm a huge proponent of getting you a therapist, counselor, whatever, especially someone who has experienced domestic violence. So my counselor was a survivor herself. And so that
Okay.
really helped because then she can actually understand where I'm coming from. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
She can get the emotional roller coaster. And she had been out of it. It's funny because I remember her telling me that there was a moment recently where her new husband said something, and she looked at him like, "Who do you think you're talking to?" Right? And she said, "I have not been in an abusive relationship in damn near 20 years." And still something triggered her, you know. So there's
Right.
never a time that you're like completely over it. There's
Right.
always going to be moments that come up. It's how you deal with it. It's
Yes.
how you handle it. It's how you push through it. That's really, going to matter the most. And so for me, it's like I did all the things so to kind of help me heal from this. So I did counseling, I did journaling, I wound up doing some walking and running again. I winded up really delving more into what my spiritual practice is. Uh, talking to people helps me so much. It helps me so much. And just sharing
Good.
that story, because we have so many misconceptions and we have so many stigmas around domestic violence, in particular around those who experience domestic violence. Not so
Right.
much the abusers. We're like, okay, abusers, they're abused. But those
Right.
who experience it, oh my gosh, we have so many stigmas around us, that it's just like, and I've gone through that. Like, I've had a guy who was interested in me and say, well, I don't know how your experience with abuse will affect a relationship if we got into one. And I was sitting there like, same way your own trauma, you know
Right.
what I'm saying, can show up. Like, it's no different. Your childhood trauma, your adult trauma, all of that stuff still plays a role in your life to this day.
Yes.
It's just a matter of how you cope with it. It's how you deal with it. So, like, not dating me because I've experienced domestic violence is like, okay, all right, cool. But I took a while to start dating again. I took about a year or so to like actively start, a little bit more than a year to actively start dating again. I took time. I didn't
That's
want to rush into
good.
that. Yeah.
That's good because sometimes people find it hard. Sometimes we're scared to be alone and
Yeah.
we find ourselves getting into another relationship when we haven't even figured out the relationship with ourselves.
You look now. Look now. Yeah.
Yeah. So once you started dating and everything, how did you feel while you were dating? Did you find yourself like communicating about the guy, about what happened to you, and talk about your ex a lot? Because sometimes women do that too, and then the guy you're dating, he start he. I know sometimes some men will start doing the things that you said that your ex had did.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
I
So
go ahead.
no, I was gonna say I did not do that. Like, I
Okay,
did express
good.
to him that this is what I experienced, and sometimes it plays a role, sometimes it doesn't. But for the most part, no, I didn't. I didn't really talk about my ex, that my the abuser at all. Like,
Mhm.
if it was something that he may have done, like the person that I was with at the time, if he did
Mhm.
something that I like directly linked to something, I would call him out on it. Like, hey, you can't say that. You know what I mean? Or you can't do that. It was never any. It was a nice guy. Like, don't get me wrong, it was a nice guy. But so I didn't really have to go through that. Whereas, like, yes, my ex used to do this. No, I didn't do that. I left that. I did a whole ritual to let that go, like a whole ritual in order to just like release that. And so I was intentional about not bringing that old baggage so heavily into my next relationship. You know?
Mhm. Well, that's
Yeah.
good. So how are you feeling today?
I feel great. Like,
Hey.
I feel great. I always feel, I didn't realize how cared for and supported I was until after I left. that relationship, that situation. I didn't know. And so once I discovered that, it just became just even better. Like I knew who supported me and who was there for me. And I felt like I could really rely on people, because we are so isolated.
Yeah.
We are so isolated during that, when we are with someone. And that's why, like, even with COVID-19, it's like people are like, oh my gosh, we're going to have to be stuck in a house. And sometimes my freedom, my freedom was connected to me going to work because I was able to not deal with the bull crap that was going on at home. So work was my escape. But if you are quarantined at home, if you are stuck at home, if your city has a stay-at-home order, home isn't always safe for a lot of people.
Yeah,
So,
and I was saying that just imagine some of the women that deal with abuse. They are quarantined with these men.
Yep. And so
terrible.
a lot of calls have been happening. A lot of the domestic violence organizations as well as the police force are saying they are receiving an increase in domestic violence calls because of the stay-at-home order. And so that's really scary, because a lot of times these victims do not have, and I hate to use the term victims, but those who are experiencing domestic violence don't have anywhere to go, or they're unsure of where they can go, And so I held a webinar just for survivors because this can be really triggering, like that sense of not feeling protected, right? Because your abuser is someone who always tells you, like, I'm the only one that can protect you. I'm the only one that cares about you. And when you are isolated from your network that actually helps you cope and deal in different ways that they may not even realize it can bring up a lot of old stuff for you, And so I did host a webinar, and I'll probably host a few more just to kind of give those folks like ideas of what they can do to feel protected, to feel secure, during this time, because it's so important that we keep a positive mindset because we can go down that road again,
Yes. So tell us a little bit more, elaborate on what you do as far as for a living.
Yeah. So I am a full-time speaker. I speak about domestic violence and I speak about motherhood in general, and specifically about being a single mom, which of course has its own challenges, especially when you have a really hilarious son. He's really hilarious. And so he keeps me on my toes. And so I speak about that. I speak at different companies and organizations. I offer workshops around how employees can support those who are experiencing domestic violence within the workforce, encouraging companies to develop domestic violence policies, because a lot of companies don't realize that each year they lose millions of dollars due to domestic violence in different ways. It can be just because, the violence came to the office. It can be because of health insurance and victims having to constantly go to the hospital. It can be because of losing employees and they have to rehire, like all of these different factors. And so when you have a domestic violence policy in place, it reduces those risks of losing money as well as losing employees and it not being a safe environment for everyone. So I talk about that. I do workshops around that. I do workshops around just women in general, but specifically mothers going for what they deserve. And oftentimes, like, not second guessing ourselves. And that can be in career, that can be in relationships, that can be in friendships too. Like, how do you show up as yourself, but then also how do you ask for what you need, which a lot of times we don't, But specifically domestic violence, and then also I'm launching a domestic violence online coaching program
Wow.
That
Okay.
is for those who have left the relationship, but now they're trying to create a new normal. And what does
Okay.
that look like? How do they develop, self-love? How do they work on forgiving themselves? Because we hold a lot of guilt. I know I held a lot of guilt around that. How do we reconnect with our children after domestic violence? Parenting after that. So, and a bunch of other different areas that I found and speaking with other survivors, as including myself, is just like what we had to go through to kind of
Mhm.
create this new world, this new normal, and really showing up in a way that say, yes, I experienced that, but that is not all of who I am, you know?
Wow. Yes. Yes. I applaud you for doing that because
Thank you.
it's so much needed and a lot of awareness need to be brought out.
Yes,
Definitely.
absolutely.
And I myself, I'm a victim of domestic violence. So if you
Right.
ever need someone to speak about it, I got a testimony. I have one also.
Awesome. Yes. Do it. Yes. So
Yes.
and it works. Some people, they went to counseling and they are fine and they went through that. Some people use, spirituality and religion for them to go through their healing. Some people discover their voice and they don't shut up. I am one of those people. But I am one of those people. I talk about it all the time. I try to give people tips on how they can support friends, because I
Mhm.
remember one of my best friends, she said to me, she said she even called the hotline to figure out what could she do to help me. And she was in New York and I'm in Charlotte. And she just was like, I need to find something, some way to help support my friend,
Right.
you know?
Right.
And that's important because we think that it doesn't touch us, but it does. It
Right.
does. We all
It's
know someone who's
important and it's
experienced abuse.
hard. It's
Yeah.
important and hard. It is. I think the only thing that saved me from my experience is with me having a youth program for young girls.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
never like to contradict myself. It's
Mhm.
like, I go to a group session with them. I'm talking to them about different things. I wouldn't have felt right if I was to tell them one thing and I'm going through another at home.
Right.
So
Right.
right when my incident happened, I left him right then and there. So mine's
Right.
wasn't continuously. So those
Mhm.
the girls saved my life, and my husband, we were just friends. We was like the best of friends, and
Mhm.
from us praying together and communicating and everything, we end up becoming in a relationship like a year or so later. But it was just me going having that village there. But
Yeah.
but my main thing was like my girls, because I know they go through stuff and they look up to me a lot.
Yeah. That's
So
so. Yeah, we all have our outlets, and
outlets,
so I,
yes.
I think the other thing is that, and this is something that I've been really mulling over, is also like how do we teach young people about healthy relationships? I did not see healthy
Yes.
relationships when I was younger. I did not see it. And so I couldn't
Mhm.
base my relationships off of anything other than what I kind of knew I didn't want to deal with. But that's the tricky part about abuse, is that it sneaks up on you. The person doesn't just automatically just start hitting you immediately. It is
Right.
progressive. Just like how you date and you get to know someone, you're like, oh, I like this person. Okay, I think I really have feelings for this person. Oh my God, I think I love this person. I'm in love with this person. Like, it is progression. It's the same thing with abuse. It is progression.
And
And
what's
you,
another thing that us as women have a lack of is having fathers. So we don't
mhm,
know sometimes that what a nurturing father, a father that love us and care about us and tell us how to how a man should treat us or even show
mhm,
us, different things of that nature. It's like sometimes we don't have that. And then it don't even necessarily have to be physical abuse. Some guys
Mhm.
do it mentally, emotionally, and verbally. It's like,
Financially.
yes,
Mhm.
financially, everything. And some of us don't even notice it
Yeah.
because it's like, I don't know, it's just something about us women. We endure and take on so much, but let
Yeah.
us do something to that man. He
Right.
like, no.
Right.
Like,
And so
no.
it's interesting because so my dad was an active person in my life. He was an active person in my life. I've been blessed with like my dad and I are super close.
Hmm.
And we had a conversation recently, and he's super supportive of my journey and my path, and he was ready to come down here and lay hands, you know. But I remember him telling me that a part of the reason why he did it was because it was a learned behavior. He said every man that he knew when he was growing up all put their hands on their women. He said, I don't know not one who did it. And that says a lot, right? Because abuse is a learned behavior on both sides. It
Right.
is abuse on learned behavior.
And
My
some men,
abuser said
some men,
that his dad was abusive.
wow.
You understand? Yeah. So it's definitely a learned behavior. It takes a lot to unlearn, just like it takes a lot for us to unlearn a lot of different things.
Hmm.
That we've learned in childhood. A lot of what we've learned in childhood does not or should not apply to what we do now. So really accepting the fact that there's traits that we all have that we've learned that we should let go of is important.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely. Well, I really appreciate you just being so transparent about you
Yeah.
and everything that you do. And I'm so happy that you are bringing awareness because it is so needed. Like, it's so needed.
Yeah.
And it's,
And if any of
um,
your listeners are like, if they feel like they may be in a situation, if they're questioning if they're in a situation that doesn't seem healthy, look, my social media is open. They can definitely reach out to me. We'll try to figure it out together. I have no problems whatsoever with that. I think it's
well,
super important.
please let us know your information. How can
Oh,
they
yeah.
get in contact with
Yeah. Yep. So my social media handle for all platforms, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn, is I am Melody Co. That's IamMelody.co. My website is www.iammelody.co. And my email is fearless@iammelody.co. So any way to reach out to me, let me know. We can talk it through. It could be something. It could be nothing. I've had people reach out to me and say, well, I can't really figure this out. But also trust your gut. Our signs, our gut always lets us know. And sometimes we try to put that away, but trust your gut. You know if you know.
hmm Well, what is some encouraging words that you could share with women to help them heal themselves and prosper in life?
Absolutely. So, one thing I will say is that you are competent, capable, resourceful, and whole. And that's something that I've been learning through my coaching training program is that we are all capable, resourceful, whole, creative. We have all of that in us. It's a matter of digging deep to get it out, and so that we can always know what our needs are and how can we meet them. We don't
Hmm.
need anyone else to meet them. That and the other thing I will also say is that it is okay. There is no shame in what you've experienced. It is no shame whatsoever in what you experience. It is a lesson. It is a lesson that you will learn, and that once you come out of it, you will be so much stronger and so much more doper than you could even imagine. So go for it.
Hmm.
Go for that freedom. Go for that fearlessness and do it.
Yes. Well, thank you so much. I
No
really
problem.
appreciate this. Like, you the bomb.
Thank you for having this. This is really dope. Like, I was like, okay, let me check this out. This is great. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to Life Her Podcast, where we help heal women all over the world. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram and Facebook, Life Her Podcast, and check out our YouTube page as well. And make sure you subscribe. You can also look onto our website and you can purchase merchandise and listen to the podcast episodes. I am Yvette Lloyd. I am Life Her. Love yourself, ladies. Take care of yourself and others you love dearly.
Stay tuned for the next session. Don't make it be your last.